Hey, what's up guys, Chris here, and in this video we're going to cover the best controller settings and custom binds for Final Fantasy VII First Soldier. And just to get this out of the way right at the top, this video is specifically for those who have controllers or software that let you remap the buttons on your controller to whatever you want. For example, SCUF controllers, the Strike Pack for Dualshock controllers, or what I'm using here, which is the Xbox Elite controller. The reason for this video is that First Soldier here on launch does not have custom binds or even different button layouts, and the default control scheme that they gave us So first we'll talk real quick about some of the essential functions on the default layout that we want to move around, and we're going to cover everything from people who use 0 paddles on the back of their controller all the way up to using 4 paddles on the controller. And while there's still a number of issues with controllers on First Soldier, which I'm going to talk about in another video, these custom binds and settings will help alleviate those problems and make it slightly easier on you so you can get more victories. If you guys liked the video, link up the like and subscribe material below for more First Soldier content. Alright guys, let's take a look at the base button configuration they have here in First Soldier, and let's talk about some of the things that we want to move around or that were kind of not great about this base layout that we want to change with our custom button mapping. Number one is that this aim in Materia 3, so the way they actually did Materia in here that I kind of like is that you hold down left bumper, and while you're holding this down, it will actually ready your Materia, and then you can use left trigger, and right bumper in order to throw out your materia. Now, the problem with this is that it can be kind of difficult to hold down your left bumper and hit your left trigger at the same time, so it's kind of hard to cast your Materia 3 in the heat of combat without using like 2 fingers essentially on your bumper and your trigger at the same time in order to throw your Materia 3. So just one of these small tips is if you're playing on controller, one of the things you want to do is put your most important materia or your materia that you think you're going to use the most, put those in slots 1 and 2, because these are going to be a lot easier to use. Maybe if you are comfortable with this isn't a big deal, but for me, it's a little bit harder to use that Materia 3, so just one of those small things. Now let's talk about these face buttons. There's a couple of things that we're going to want to move. The melee attack being on Y, this one, you need to be able to aim and melee attack in First Soldier. Melee attacks are super powerful, and it's the furthest button from the joystick. A lot of first-person shooter games usually put this on B, or they'll use button layouts or let people put this on B so that they can quickly go from here to here. It's a little bit shorter of a distance than going from here to here. And as we know in first-person shooter competitive games, every millisecond counts. So we're going to want to move this melee attack just a little bit closer. And the other thing is that we have crouch, stand, and dodge on this. Now that's fine. Crouching is fine. Crouching's usually not an essential function like when you're in the middle of a fight, but the dodge is kind of an essential function. This is something you may want to use in the middle of a fight, so we want to move this off of here too. You want to be able to aim and maneuver at the same time that you dodge, so we want to move that one as well. And then 2 puzzling decisions. Here on the D-pad, they actually have 2 things that we want to be able to use in the middle of fights, and that's going to be use consumables, so using potions, basically, is what this is. The way they have it set up in our default configuration here is you have to take your thumbstick, you have to move your thumb off of the thumbstick here to up on the D-pad to use your potion. What that means is this is going to take maybe, I don't know, a quarter of a second, half of a second to do that. You're going to stop moving. This is your movement thumbstick. When you're in the middle of a firefight or when you're wanting to use a potion, you're probably like running from somebody's shooting at you, you're trying to get away, or you're trying to reposition, so it's usually a pretty tense situation. You're usually not in a situation where you run away and then get to use a potion undercover. This is going to be an essential function. We want to keep moving while we're using our potions. And then lastly, we have change guns is left on the D-pad. You can't swap your weapons without stopping movement, and if you like are on your primary weapon and you run out of ammo and you're in the middle of a firefight, a close range firefight, having to take your thumb off of that thumbstick again is going to be completely detrimental. So those are the things that we want to switch. Those are the things I don't like about this default layout. So let's go ahead and jump into Xbox accessories, and we're going to take a look at our button mapping. All right, so we're back over here in the Xbox accessories app. If you're on a Windows PC, I believe every Windows PC comes with this. Otherwise, you have to download like the Xbox app. Whatever controller you're using probably has a software similar to this where you can go through all of your button mappings. And we're going to first talk about what we're doing up here on the top. We didn't change any of these buttons. We talked about the materia casting, aiming, shooting. This is all pretty standard. We don't want to mess with these because that's really just going to get super complicated to throw your materia around. Now on these face buttons, there's a couple of things that I did. I swapped Y. This used to be our melee attack. So maybe in editing here, I'll throw these up here. We swapped our melee attack over to swap weapons. So this means when we're in the middle of a fight, we can actually swap to our secondary weapon, but real quick, coming off this stick right here. We moved our melee attack down here to the B button, replacing crouch. So our B button is now melee attack. Again, we talked about having that quick here. A and X remain unchanged. These are pretty standard for most button layouts. This will allow you to get to that melee attack a little bit quicker and also swap weapons in the middle of combat. So what did we do with our crouch and dodge button? We actually moved that, as you can see right here, to our right stick push. So while you're in the middle of a fight, you can actually double tap on your right stick in order to dodge, or you can just tap your right stick once in order to crouch, and then you can push either jump or push this again to stand up. So we actually mapped all of our essential functions here on these 4 buttons and then our right stick. Future Chris here, I wanted to mention that a lot of people like to use melee on the right stick as well. I forgot to mention that when I was recording this live, so I'm editing this in right here. If you are more comfortable using your melee on the right stick press, that's also a really, really good option. On our left stick over here, we talked about using those potions in the heat of battle. So if you map your potions, this is up on the D-pad right here. You map this to your left stick press. This will let you move and use potions at the same time. So let's go over to the D-pad. What did we move onto the D-pad in that left and up slots? Up, I actually kept the exact same. The reason I did this is because when you are picking up items in your inventory, you have to use up and down on the D-pad to scroll through that. If you remap this up, you won't be able to scroll up in your inventory in order to swap items when you're picking up loot. That was a problem. I wanted to remap this, but you can't. So yeah, we have 2 buttons for up on the D-pad. The sacrifice here is that we lost our ping ability on our right stick, but pinging in the game is not a super essential function. If you really want to, you can remap that over here. On the left stick press right here, this is your auto run function. I moved this to the D-pad. That's not something we need to use in the middle of a fight. That's something you're using just to walk across the map to save your thumbsticks a little bit. We don't need to be using that. That's why I moved this off this left stick. The left stick, this is a button we can use in the middle of combat. I moved that auto run over here, and then down and right on the D-pad, those stayed the same. Okay, let's talk about our paddles for a second. You see down here on the bottom right, I have A. So jump and melee are my 2 bottom paddles. So if I were to prioritize these 1 and 2, I would use melee. If you're only using 1 paddle, melee would be my first priority. If you're using 2 paddles, melee and jump. That's a pretty standard layout for most people playing first-person shooter games. A lot of games, people like to melee and jump and be able to aim at the same time. So if you're only comfortable with using 2 paddles, or maybe you're using that strike pack with 2 paddles, jump, melee, that's going to be the way to go. A lot of people actually swap these around. I'm just really weird. Don't do what I do. Put the melee on this one. If you've never used paddles before, put your jump over here. I just learned it the wrong way, and my brain's programmed that way. Put the jump away from your aim stick. It's the smart way to do it. The other 2 paddles here, what I've done is I've actually mapped B. This is going to be our crouch and dodge. The reason I did that is because in the middle of combat, sometimes I don't want to have to press in my right stick. Sometimes that can throw your aim off just a little bit. If I need to dodge and aim at the same time, I can use this paddle right here to dodge. And then on this paddle, I have left on the D-pad. This lets me swap weapons. And the reason why this is actually important is because you can use strafe canceling. You can swap weapons in order to cancel strafing. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, we're going to cover that in another video. You could also map this materia shift from your left bumper down here. If you play a lot of the sorcerer, this might actually be a really good idea on controller. If you're using materia a whole lot, you want to be able to have easy access to that third slot or not worry about where your fingers are landing on these bumpers and triggers. One of the things you can do is actually map your left bumper down here to a paddle. That way you just have to hold down that paddle and hit whatever materia slot you want. You don't have to worry about accidentally hitting the wrong button up here or something in the heat of battle. Anyway, this is how I've mapped my controller in order to make it a little bit more familiar, and how a lot of other first-person shooter games and common button layouts are. This gets us a little bit closer to that. Hopefully in the future we'll see them add custom binds and we won't need something like this, but that may be a little ways off. The controller support for the game is still relatively new. I mean, the game's brand new. Controllers still have a lot of issues with them, but this is the best that we can do in order to make the controls familiar for ourselves, for all of you who have played shooter games before. Let me know in the comments section below if you guys have different custom layouts that you're using or different buttons. I would love to hear your layouts. I'm still trying to tinker and find out if there's a better way to do things. Thanks for watching, guys. We will catch you next time.